Hey guys, thanks for tuning in again. I appreciate it. I'm going to be talking about and go through what some people believe, including myself, to be the baddest and coolest race carbs ever to be produced. When I mean that, I'm talking about the badass looks, design, and results he had back in the day. And last but not least, the creator of this bad boy masterpiece, Willie Kendig, and his Kendig Variable Venturi Carburettor, later to be known as the Predator Carb. It wasn't long after Willie's honourable discharge from the service, flight engineer in the US Navy, that he quickly became a great and well-known mechanic, and even operating a few auto service centres in his region of his own, around the Visalia area and surrounding county. Before that, though, was set to have apparently worked for Ford as an engineer, and even built and raced the 32 hot rod Ford Roadster in them early 50s times. And that particular Roadster has been found again in these recent years and been put back to its original Willie's glory, and has made way to a private collection or museum, something or other. Always cool when something survives and, gets preserved, especially when owned by a pioneer like Willie Kendig, who later, after all this, went out to invent and patent the Variable Venturi Kendig Carb, the Predator Carb. I myself remember always seeing ads of the Predator Carb in my 80s magazines, even into the early 90s magazines, remembering that they just looked, so cool and badass. Not to mention they were a little pricey also, compared to, say, your conventional Holly Carb of equivalence. It got your attention, that variable 390 CFM to 930 CFM it was designed to deliver on demand. And again, not forgetting that cool, meaning business look they just had. If we go back to the start of the Kendig Carb days, it was originally used and raced on Dino Don Nicholson's drag car, his Maverick, I believe, somewhat of a collaboration between Kendig and Dino Don, a sponsor, so to speak. So if Dino Don was using them, you know that he sees something with great results or potential, that's for sure. Nicknamed Dino Don after he was, one of the first racers to ever use and tune on a rear-wheel chassis dyno in the late 50s. And, also estimated by the NHRA to have won 90% of his match races. Now, that's a guy who would know how to pick out and use a product if it were good. I think anyway, don't you agree? Story goes that the NHRA ended up banning the Kendig carbs in pro stock during some rule changes, and had reclassed them as being fuel injected through Holly's protests, apparently. Now, that just reminds me of the story that Tucker Automobiles had with the three big leading auto manufacturers of the time. Nothing against Holly, but you get what I mean there. So basically being let out the door by NHRA Pro Stock, the carbs were eventually remodeled and branded to what would be the Predator Carb, released to the everyday hot rodders, street machiners, drag racers, boat racers, tractor pullers, etc. To some, the Predator Carb, an easy-going carb to tune, maintain, and get on top of, that's great. But apparently to most, they didn't know or understand how to tune it. The Venturi doors were sensitive. Also, there was a sensitive fuel cam that needed to be tailored right to the engine, to the engine's needs. Also, the single and yet small diameter fuel inlet was a limiting factor. But again, for all those guys that got on top of it, rest assured he outperformed any carb competition out there of the time. I'll run through some older articles here, but also feel free to pause and zoom in yourself and have a good read of this stuff. It's real interesting. Take this for instance. There was an all-day carb test on this drag car back in the day, and the final battle between the prepped Holly 850 carb and the Predator. And shows here the Predator had the upper and leading edge over its Holly rival. The average test run results were 10.29 at 136 for the Predator versus a slower 10.46 at 135 for the race-prepped Holly 850. They did stress the Predator had, on this article, they did stress the Predator had a better response and download torque, and weren't allowed to tune the chassis to these advantages due to the test rule they set out in place, stating that the gap in ET again would have been greater if they could have. Not only there was, so many leading results about the Predator carb, but also take a look at this, take a look at this old article talking about the fuel efficiency it had also, talking about a 4-day rally race here and how a 428 cubic inch big block topped with a Predator carb went from 12 miles to the gallon to 22 miles to the gallon. Now, wow, horsepower and efficiency. Now, they were onto something there, weren't they? Okay. All right, look, guys, I'm not being biased here. Well, maybe I am a little. But it was a tit-for-tat game. Not every user or application seen the Predator on top. Now, take a look at this old article performing back-to-back tests on a Pro Gas Champion Monza drag car. A prepped Holly 800 CFM versus Predator carb. Now, the Holly 800 on this occasion had the slight edge over, Kendig's carb. And the average between them best runs shown here were a 10.02 at 136.57 for the Holly versus a slightly slower 10.15 at 133.87 for the Predator. But read the last paragraph on that. Remember, this was already a refined and winning Monza drag car, already utilising that sought-after Holly that it had, whereas the Predator carb just came along out of nowhere on the day to do the test run comparisons. Again, admittedly not getting a good chance to tune right for the engine and car's needs on the day. So you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Another cool article I found is this flared guard convertible Mustang with an old school twin turbo small block Windsor, utilising a draw through turbo setup via, a Predator carb. Now that's cool. Set out apparently to destroy Porsche sports cars was the primary aim for this particular build apparently. Now that's keen. Yeah, guys, I'll never forget all them cool ads the Predator carb had, along all the championship winners and record speed setters they had utilising this carb. Just great marketing, always remember that. Not really sure whatever happened to it, to this carb though, like how it just slowly faded away and disappeared from being used or even further revised. Maybe, you guys can share some insight on that in the comments area. At one point, they became real obsolete with no remanufactured, Rico parts available for a long period of time. Apparently, the metering block and spool, which required and relied on a perfect bore, once that was damaged or worn a little, that's when these carbs or tune were always, showing signs that they were on its way out. With no replacement or perfect repair, made a lot of guys shelve them and, just been forgotten about. Until these recent years, I've noticed them make a comeback, especially in the true vintage world, who want, period correct setups and builds like that. There are still plenty of survivors out there running well and truly perfect, and some even fetch top dollar. I've seen some of these carbs, some thrashed ones from $50 all the way up to $1,000 plus for a, new old stock, brand new in the box. So, like anything out there that's old and rare, really. Here's some old school setups. A few Clevelands there with twin Predator carbs on top, similar to what I have myself for a future old school Clevo build, actually. And check out this small block Chev with, the orange and grey contrast. Wow, now, that just looks killer right there. That's perfect for a hot rod. There you go, guys. A little insight on the forgotten race carb, invented, designed by the pioneer himself, Willie Kendig, Predator carburetor. And remember, guys, old school's cool. Also, guys, don't forget to go into the description bit and have a read of that. And what I'll do is I'll include some links from other people, from other videos and you know, things like that. And you'll just see some other people that run these carbs on their own setups, and you'll just see how crisp and clean and, you know, responsive they are on their own setups. And I'll include that, so you know, feel free to go in the descriptions, have a read, and then you can get access to those links. And I'm sure those people won't mind me sharing their videos, and you'll just see how cool and crisp these carburetors still are, even in today's comparisons, you know, against all the newish, you know, style of carbs that are out there. And they still, you know, they still hold their ground for an old school carb. They can still, you know, kick ass. Don't worry about that.